Gentlemen, got a great game on tap here between Massachusetts's, I think that's how you say it, Boston's own Bradley Whitmarsh and Dave Wiegand of Portland, Oregon. This is a matchup of two opponents who know each other very well. Great guys, members of the American Scrabble community. Dave, multi-time former national champion, still not a world champion, will be someday, I'm confident. And in the words of my co-commentator, David Webb, it's Bradley to go first.
And do we know how these guys got on in their first game of the day?
I believe they both met defeat. So they're looking to even the scoreboard. David, it's a joy to commentate with you. David, for those of you who don't know, is probably the most prolific Scrabble commentator in the world with his wonderful Dweebovision YouTube channel. And I'll let him do more of a plug if he chooses to, but do yourselves a favor if you want more of this kind of high-quality commentated action with a great commentator. Got to tune into David Webb's channel.
Thank you, Jesse. I do feel that Scrabble is underrepresented in terms of video content on the internet, and that's one reason why it's such a pleasure to have this high-quality streaming coming from the Crescent City Cup. I think this is the best streaming in terms of camera angles and clarity and information that I've seen from any stream, and I think this is the way that Scrabble ought to be presented.
Yeah, it's fabulous. It feels like we've entered the next century. Well, I guess we entered the next century 2 decades ago. How about the next decade? We're in 2020 with a modern, excellent streaming setup, high-quality commentators, high-quality tools, and the best players in the world. Can't ask for much more.
And playing the best game in the world. Every rack is intriguing. We saw in the last game how it exploded into life right from the beginning, and we had bingos all over the board, and both players had really bingo-y racks. Absolute opposite this game. Or have I spoken too soon?
Wow, right as you say that, Bradley wakes up with some ammo on his rack. So,
yeah. Commentator's curse.
We might see some action soon. This is Bradley's a quirky rack. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say Bradley's opened with a 5-letter play, which includes the V, which pretty much guarantees that we're going to have a fairly open game.
Right, because now the right side of the board is going to be open for bingos, and it's usually those overlap plays in the opener that contain some of the volatility, but there's not going to be any overlapping in this one. So,
absolutely, I think there's been a tendency, certainly over the last few decades, and maybe it's always been there, to prefer short moves on the opening move to provide fewer floaters for your opponent, and also to leave yourself a better rack leave. And I think that naturally leads to the second play being an overlapping play, which can stifle the board. 23. Which is why it's nice to see a 5-letter opening play, because it increases the chances of having a wide open game, which I think as viewers and fans of the game we probably prefer.
Yeah, 23.
Well, there is some joy in a tactical closed encounter. Partially because they're unusual and they force us to think along different thought patterns. But I think they both have their time and place. Well, in this game, wow, for our viewing audience, guess the blank on this one. Beautiful word, right out of geometry,
86.
Or algebra, or something, some math class at some point. Mantissa going down for 86 points with absolutely no hesitation.
Yeah, that's a great play because it's a double-double, so even better than hitting a triple word square.
Right, 4x multiplier. It's a common one of these things that when you start out, you think, oh, the best play has to go to the triple word score, but that double-double, the 4x multiplier is really a great way to carve out a lead. And that puts Bradley Whitmarsh up by 97 points already.
Now, Dave's rack looks pretty bingo-y, but does he have one?
Funny you should ask that. I was just asking myself the same thing. I actually don't think he has anything here.
Because he's got the ing ending, the co beginning, the con beginning. He's got a lot of useful looking prefixes and suffixes. So your instant reaction or first reaction is that there maybe will be a bingo, especially given that there are a number of floaters on the board. But maybe he has drawn a blank with this particular set.
Well, he did. Oh, I see what you did there. Good punmanship. Yeah, he did have cloaking available, which just got blocked, and that might explain his dour countenance.
Ah, he does have a bingo. He has.
There we
is
go.
Is it solacing?
I don't have the our chat open at the moment, so I don't. It's just kind of a nice feeling. But yeah, Dave is able to. He's able to get past the sevens on this one and throws down analogic. And solacing would have also done the trick. So Dave is not down too far here, only down 25.
Yeah, and that looks a pretty good pickup for him.
Not bad at all, I think. I don't know if it'll lead to anything immediately, but certainly it's going to have his fair share of options on that next turn.
I see Bradley struggling with the GUW triplicate, which is another very unsynergetic set of three tiles. U and W of themselves is probably one of the worst pairs of tiles to have. And there are a few tiles which go really badly with W and U, and I think G and B and F are examples, and he's got one of them in the G, so he'll be looking to play off as many of them as he can, and he has.
All three, no less.
Yeah, and a good rack leave, so great play.
Skillfully done there. And without hesitation, too. Only a minute per turn so far. Dave is sometimes he finds his bingos quickly, but I've also seen him run into time trouble, especially when he's more tired. I think that's universal there. So that's a small thing to keep an eye on, is how Dave manages his time here.
So is Bradley generally a quick player?
I think so. Hey, of course, as you said, the commentator's curse. You say that someone is a speed demon, and then they burn 11 minutes trying to choose the right anagram of Satine R, but heraldic.
Wow, great play.
Very nice.
Back-to-back bingos from Dave Wiegand. And that puts him into the lead.
175.
But I think it's going to give Bradley some comeback here, and I don't think Bradley's going to waste any time on this one.
Oh, wow, yeah, he's got to play alongside heraldic, hasn't he? Notepad.
That's right. And he did have Antipode before, but this is going to score a whole lot more. So, Brad, that's always nice when your opponent bingos and sets you up very nicely for your bingo of your own.
Wow, we have been so fortunate with these first two games today. An absolute bingo fest in both of them.
Absolutely. And to be frank, I think that's kind of the way that the game is headed. Our lexicon gets broader and broader, and the percentage of turns on which you have some kind of bingo available just seems to keep increasing. So I've been seeing, especially with the new lexicon CSW19, some real shootouts. So. Now, what is Dave going to do here? He's down 54 points. He's got the X to score with. He should be able to. I actually don't see anything wonderful yet. You can play Toxic through that. Oh, but that's nothing to write home about. And I don't know if you can play through the N effectively.
Yeah, he's just one letter away from Coturnix through that N.
Oh, beautiful. Or even just Extinct, which would be a lot of points. Also a letter off of Ototoxic.
Oh, very nice.
Change that U to an O. I'm sure he spotted that possibility.
Does he have anything on the top row?
Well, he might, but only if he retains the X. And he's not going to want to do that because it's one of these things where the value of the X depends strongly on the hotspots that are available. If there's a hotspot for an X, then you're going to want to hold on to the X and wait until you can draw a play. But with when there's no hotspot available for the X, then keeping it for another turn is actually quite counterproductive because it's very poor for bingoing. And it's just not going to score you that much. So I think he's going to want to ditch the X. I think he could play Cox and 35. I think the leave on that is really quite dreadful, though. So should be something better than that.
Sorry, where are you seeing that Cox might play or would play?
Just on the 10th row, making Car and Oda.
Okay.
That's not much to write home about, but probably Toxic is a little more productive, actually. Toxic is 32.
I'm just looking at this board. It looks wide open, but in reality, apart from the top row, the N and the O, there aren't really many bingo lanes on the board. Heraldic, Analogic, and Mantissa have really prevented access to the bottom half of the board.
Right. It'll take another move or two to reopen some plays, either like from the L downwards or some overlaps on the right. Or you're right. Actually, there's not all that bingo friendly, but actually Bradley. And he usually goes by Brad, so I'm not sure why I've been calling him Bradley, but Brad has a bingo coming down unless Dave blocks it through that G. Not an off spot, but he is going to bingo, I think.
What has he got through the G?
I see tangents fitting just barely. And Brad already played one mathematical word this game. And
he's on a roll then.
Right, exactly. Notepad even could argue is something a geometer might carry around. So mathematical theme on his end.
So Dave's taken quite a bit of time on this move, and understandably so, because there just aren't any great candidate plays that have come to mind.
And to be frank, this is a tendency of Dave, I would say. He tends to really bank his time on the non-bingo turns to really try to maximize them.
Might he be thinking about playing something like low tick, given that he can't do much about the N at the top? Create some volatility down the bottom, given that he's behind.
It's just that the X is such an anchor that he would be opening the board and obtaining a non-bingo friendly lead in the process.
Yeah.
Right, so
36.
okay, he's playing Toxin. Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. 36 points opens up a lane
211.
on the second row because, as you mentioned, he's trailing, so that's something he wants. And it is going to come down, but it's going to lead to some fireworks because Dave has just pulled the Q on this one, and there are going to be some points scored this next move. Maybe even as many as the bingo scored.
Oh, wow. You're way ahead of me, Jesse. I can see he's got the U to go with the Q, and that's as far as I've got. Ah. Is this what you were thinking of, Coquettes?
That's right. Also Cloak, I believe, through the L, which would have gone down anyway, but Coquettes is, I think that Dave is not going to waste too much time on this one.
So that would be 63 points. So, yeah, he'd be back to within about 20 or 30 points of Brad.
And he saves the F for if the I in Toxin. He saves the F for that spot. That could easily be another 50 points next turn. So
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
right. He's right there. He's right there.
And that really justifies the time he spent over the Toxin move.
It's always hard to know when to burn the time because you just don't know how much time you'll need later, and you sort of need to budget for that. And you kind of need to plan for the worst case scenario where you could easily need a time for a complex pre-end game or end game, but at the same time you want to get the moves earlier right to get yourself even in the position of being able to compete at the end. So I think he's doing okay with the time management, and he's gonna have forbid and if or something along those lines for lots of points. So Brad needs to play sharply here and have some kind of a plan for keeping up.
Yeah, there are a couple of nice bingo lanes on the board. The second N of Tangents and also the second row underneath Toxin. But apart from that, it's not a massively bingo-y board. So, Jesse, are there any four-letter extensions of Toxin? I'm not testing you. It's just something which has come to mind.
I think that I'm pretty sure that you should be looking the other way. Actually, I don't think there's a lot of stuff. Toxin front extensions. I think autotoxin, cytotoxin. I could definitely see there being a 6-letter extension. And the other thing I will say is I can totally see David Wiegand knowing all of those extensions. That would be the play of the year, the play of the decade, really.
Yeah, I wonder how many 6-letter front extensions there are. There must be some, I would have thought, given how many 3- or 4-letter ones. I think there's aflatoxin as well, isn't there?
Wow. That's cool. I'm going to cheat and find out. You've raised my curiosity. Immunotoxin and enterotoxin.
Wow, just the two.
Just the two.
Gosh.
Oh, clearly Brad needs to start fishing for enterotoxin. He's like not that far off, so I guess that's settled.
That's exactly what he's thinking. You can see it in his face.
We found his best move. We can go home and be happy. Or we're already at home, but what is he actually going to do here? I have not been looking at rack that closely because it's not scintillating. He might just play pole and EM, which is going to be 26. It seems like there could be something on the right, kind of making DAP or PEP or something like that.
26.
Yeah, and it looks like he's gone with pole. And what we're gonna see here is that Dave is gonna be leading after this next move.
Yeah. Is there anything other than forbid in that spot? Possibly forbad, but forbid would be better. Better vowel to keep.
The question for me with forbid versus forbad would just be a question of the power tiles that are out, actually, because forbid would set up QI or XI. So if the Q or the X were unseen, I would play forbad. But in this case, the Z is unseen, and so forbad would set up a big Z play, a big Z play. So I think he's going to go with forbid.
And I think we're in for another very close game because at the moment Dave is 40 points behind, so forbid's going to be in the order of about 50, so they should be within 20 points of each other.
Exactly. This is going to be another treat at the end.
And this board is just open enough that it's not really possible to close it down. So there are going to be scoring spots in 3 or 4 different spots of the board all the way to the end of the game.
Exactly. So, and that was an important move also because it let Dave play quickly. I'm sure, is feeling the clock pressure a little bit. I don't mean to ramble on and on about the clock, but it's an important concern when you know you're going into a tight finish. So 12 minutes should be enough time to play a good pre-end game. All right. So we're back looking at Brad's options here.
No L for venology.
Right. Venogony is probably not going to stay on the board against Dave.
So Brad does have edgy through the D of forbid. Pretty grimrackly, but he would score well and it would stop Dave from going in that spot.
I think grim is the operating word for that leave. Not that it's wrong. Another option is Goonie through the O at the top left, leaving EOV. I wouldn't call that an exciting rack leave. Probably the only word I could come up with for that one would be tolerable. Forgivable. But Goonie would be 34, and so I think that's probably an upgrade for edgy at least.
Yeah.
And from Brad's perspective, it's just really important to get rid of an O and get rid of the V and the Y, ideally. And probably in terms of priorities, the V definitely needs to be dispatched, and then getting rid of that O. There's almost something on the left of AR and Notepad.
I was just looking at that spot because the V can go in front of AR. So I'm just wondering how many 3-letter plays there are with the remaining tiles, which would indicate how much of a bad thing or a good thing it would be to retain the V.
Right, that's a great point.
Because one V has gone, so there's absolutely no danger of Brad being having 2 on his rack.
Oh, and he's playing Goopy for
33.
33. I think that is a better alternative than Goonie. It's sharp play from Brad. Generally, ENV, vowels, vowel heavy, EOV leave, definitely worse than ENV in general, all things being equal. So I think that was a nice play.
Yeah, and I think there's some synergy with VEN. Wow, what a pickup!
It's very interesting as a commentator watching players' poker faces. Not something I get to focus on as a competitor, and Brad doing his best to look stoic on this one. And I
Yeah,
think he's going to be able to bingo in multiple places even.
Well, certainly a big turnaround from his previous rack, where it looked like his rack was completely choked up with non-bingo-y tiles. He sorted it out in one go with Goopy, and he's now got a really bingo-y rack. But you're ahead of me, Jesse, in terms of spotting bingos which play on this board. What have you seen?
Well, for our viewers who want to exercise their bingo finding talents, there should be one through the I at the top right, and there should be another one through the N at the bottom.
Okay.
And so he's going to be bingoing pretty much for sure next turn.
Well, I think for the first time in this game, then the scales have tilted heavily in Brad's favor.
But it's worth noting that even sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I will say that it's going to be open even after those bingos.
But Dave's rack not great.
Well, I think he's going to be able to score quite well here. Our clever. I got to come up with better terms for our audience. Discerning, classy. Let's go with discerning for now. Our discerning viewership has spotted Broom at the top left for a pretty healthy score.
Oh, wow, fantastic! Yeah, and Dave's got that lined up on his rack, and the rack leave's good. So yeah.
Well, the rack leave is fat, which I think is why he hasn't laid it down immediately. And oh, yes, so he plays fob instead.
39.
Which, I'm counting that correctly. Fob is 39. So that was actually a 6-point sacrifice to not play Broom, but keep a superior AMRT leave.
Yeah, the M a lot more bingo-y than the F. But he's been very unlucky with that pick, 2 U's and an L, because there were two good bingo lanes on the board with the N of tangents and the I of forbid. Well, I guess the D of forbid as well. So Dave would have been guaranteed first shot at one of those. But that's now pretty much worthless given the pick.
There is a 7-letter word in there.
Is that tumular or mutular?
Are they both? That's right, they're both good.
And one of them takes a Y? Maybe. But there are no 7-letter leans on the board, I don't think.
If
there could be after Brad's bingo, though.
Right. So for our viewers before, so the two things we're seeing here, he could play vineries through the I at the top right, or he could play innerves or nervines at the bottom. He's picked innerves.
Okay, and neither of Dave's 7s takes an S at the end. I don't think.
Well, the question is, does Brad know that? Well, an AR ending doesn't usually those don't take S, so it wouldn't be hard for Brad to spend the 5 points on that. And Dave has gotten even more unlucky because he managed to miss on the blank last draw. There's a blank lurking out there. And now Dave is 59 and does not have the blank in hand. There's only 5 tiles in the bag for him to work with. But Brad missed the blank and the Z. Interesting. So it's certainly not over.
So what are Dave's options here?
Well, I was going to say, I think you're going to see Dave burning a lot of his time in this move. I could see it being another 3-4 minutes because this is the moment of truth, proverbially. All that means to say that I actually have no idea what he should do here. I think that he's going to need to bingo to win, and he will make a play that ideally I think he would want to find another way to open the board for bingos, because if he doesn't, Brad could just play on the right side of the board, score a bunch, and sort of close things out without fanfare. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of a play on the left side of the board, but the problem with those is that they don't score anything.
Well, that's the problem, because
keep himself in range.
Yeah, because he's 60 points behind, so if he opens the board for very little score, Brad could outrun any subsequent bingo from Dave.
Right, that's definitely true. But if Dave does bingo out, he gets the points from Brad's rack, and there's that Z that could end up on Brad's rack. So even scoring a bunch of points for Brad actually could be a trap, depending on what Dave plays. One thought, and this is probably quite bad, but he could play Muse, M-U-S, on the bottom left, setting up Amuse and Umu's hook.
Yeah, and that's quite awkward to block, because if Brad does put an A or an E in front of it, he's got to be sure that he doesn't open up a big scoring spot in the first column, and he's also got to bear in mind that he'll be leaving wide alone the right-hand side of the board, which is probably a much bigger danger anyway.
Right, that is the problem. He ideally would keep the right side of the board open, but doing so also means that Brad can score there, which is a pain. And he also, another important thing for our viewers, with 5 tiles in the bag, it's essential that he doesn't empty the bag here, because in that case, Brad develops perfect knowledge of his rack and can block exactly. So he could play something like Muter on the right side, but I think that would just really get punished by Brad, and that would just kind of end things unceremoniously. Another thought is that if he thinks that he needs to draw the blank to win, then he'll want to play more tiles.
I'm wondering how much he wants to play off both U's as well, because the U is a really non-bingo-y tile.
Absolutely.
But if he plays Ulus onto the S of Mantissa, he scores almost nothing.
Right.
And it takes a Z front hook.
I'm looking through some of our chat comments here, and I think that there's no real consensus on what he should be doing. He's about 4 or 5 minutes into this turn. I think he can spend maybe 2 more minutes on this. Maybe
what
even 3.
What candidate plays are being suggested by the people who are watching?
So one play that's being suggested is wall down from the W. Very creative. The idea being it would actually work out quite poorly because Brad... Well, maybe it wouldn't actually. Wall for 7 points sets up the column A, and Dave would retain the M and potentially threaten. That would actually be a very nice way of creating another bingo lane. And even if Brad happens to have the Y and he can cover that spot, but even if he does, then Dave would get to bingo on the right side. So wall is quite, that's the right sort of play here. Other plays are just plays to the S that turn over more tiles. Oh, interesting.
26.
Playing Bum and Fame.
Well, maybe he felt that he had to score more than the plays on the left, which simply opened the board.
Right. So he's effectively banking on Brad being unable to block off the right side of the board.
Yeah, and Fame does create a new bingo lane because Fame does take an E.
Yeah, that's sort of a weak lane, but a lane nonetheless, without a doubt. So for Brad here is in this is kind of a fun position to be in, I think, where you're just trying to stymie your opponent as much as possible, or at least I always enjoy it. He could do something like derade down from the D. That's one thing I see.
Yeah, play down from the D or down onto the S, either one, which actually obstructs the triple word square in the middle.
Yeah, maybe deraise down to the S is the one. And Dave has picked up the blank, 2-tile draw. And it's worth thinking. I think the Dave's draw would have worked better if he had played MUS. Obviously, I'm heavily biased, partisan towards my own play.
Yeah, but it would have used the same tiles, and you're right in that the MUS would have created a bingo lane, and then Dave would have had an unblockable bingo because he'd have had something hooking that, and also he would have had all strulls in column 15.
Right. Of course, the beauty of this game is yes, there's all these complex alternatives because Brad could have then chosen not to empty the bag, and it would have gotten pretty tricky. But right now, I'm a little bit worried for Dave that Brad's just going to be able to find a. He has 10 minutes to do this. I think he might just be able to find a move that just kind of closes out most of the bingos.
So if Brad does play something like derade and draws the Z, will Dave win if he bingos?
Certainly. A bingo will do it.
Okay, because derade, or even headers down onto the S, will create a bingo lane in column 14 involving a few overlaps, but there is a blank out there.
Right. That is the challenge, is to sort of in Brad's shoes, I'd be enumerating a lot of these racks. I would actually physically write down a lot of the racks that I'm scared of, and just try to figure out if each of them fits or not, which can take some time. But thankfully, he's got 10 minutes to do it. So Another thing here that's really interesting in Brad's shoes is it's always a dilemma whether to empty the bag or not, because if you don't empty the bag, then you can possibly outrun a bingo, but not emptying the bag also gives your opponent the opportunity to improve their rack by fishing, and that's a very it's like a very tough, very much like a case by case thing to feel out. There, I don't know of any hard and fast rule. I mean, they say don't empty the bag, and maybe that is the default, but there are many times where uh, your opponent is getting close to something, and maybe one more fish would be what they want. So,
And I think the score differential makes that decision very, very hard for Brad, because
absolutely.
if he does leave one in the bag, then Dave could, there will be bingo lanes, a bingo lane through either the D of forbid or the S of innerves. Brad can't block both those lanes with just 2 tiles.
And I think the thing that in Brad's case would skew me towards emptying the bag is that I think he can block almost everything. And I would be worried about Dave fishing for a bingo through the W. I don't know if there really is anything with the current pool. He has, what's the pool? It's AIIZ blank. So maybe there isn't anything through the W, but that is something I would consider is Dave could fish his way into an unblockable, even just with actually like a simple fish like KA and AS, he could fish his way to an unblockable out bingo. So I think in this situation, as Brad, I would be trying to empty the bag and take my chances.
Yeah, I would agree. Because the bingos which are currently available through the D or the S, given the unseen pool, are vastly greater than the bingos that would be available after something like D-Raid.
Exactly.
But if Brad did choose to go down the path of leaving one in the bag, he would be playing off 2 tiles, and he could do that with Shy, bottom right corner, taking out the more dangerous of the floaters in the final column and scoring a decent amount.
Well, in this case, Dave would thank his lucky stars and play Adulator triple
Oh,
or
wow.
Adulator,
Ouch.
which thanks to the chat for pointing that one out. But right, that kind of illustrates why a short play is not as good, because you don't block as many of the alternatives.
And is there a triple through the S?
As a commentator, I was hoping that I could delegate things to the people actually playing, and I could just kind of kick back. La Crusta?
Is that good?
I think that might be a phony that I come up with in when I study. Yeah, claustra. That's right. Claustra is the word, not whatever I just said. Please. I really hope my phoning ways don't infect the viewing public. That'd be bad.
So from Bradley's point of view, there are bingo lanes on the board. There's a blank unseen. There's a Z unseen. Here we go.
Okay. Yeah, this makes... Oh, man.
36.
Dave's going to have to work for this one.
So it would be a multiple overlap bingo in the penultimate column.
Yeah.
Or
Or
a
a bingo through the W. Exactly. Which I don't think exists. Or actually, you could maybe play through that S and play on top of analogic. I'm sure Dave will at least look there for. He only has 2 minutes. It's actually. I mean, he's an incredible anagrammer, but that's definitely a factor.
But any bingo wins.
Absolutely. And headers is nice. It's thematically really similar to derate or deraise. A suggestion from the chat that I quite like is hydras into the S, just because the hydras, that would be a little bit uglier to overlap.
Yeah,
That
because of all the consecutive consonants.
Right. Although you can put some things in front of the Y. So I cannot say categorically that it would have been all the racks, but I think headers is strong. It's thematically exactly the kind of thing that was well identified by Brad. And Dave is facing down the sinking feeling of maybe not quite being able to get that last.
Yeah, and the bag is empty, so he has to bingo with what he's got. It's the end of the line.
Oh, and he's going to go. Our chat spotted this a while back. I think he's going to try to underhook Mantissa. Oh, he's not going to get something there. But this is actually very smart on Dave's part. This is a classic thing that people, a mistake that people make. Brad is going to give him 32 points, and he's only down 69. So we're kind of low. Yeah, he's only down 69. That means that Dave can burn another 3 minutes thinking about this. And that's like a classic. You don't want to go overtime in this case, but he's correctly realized he can afford to go overtime and keep looking, even though it doesn't seem like there's anything there. I think that was a canny move. Okay, and our chat spoke of this as a possibility. He's gonna throw the L onto Mantissa, making Mantissel, and try to bingo out. And I think that was a good decision on his part. Brad coolly challenges, and Dave's duck face there implies that he probably knows that one isn't good.
Yeah, a bit of a Hail Mary attempt at the end there. But Mantissel does sound plausible. And I think I was watching a game yesterday when Rewatch was played. So
Rewatch.
Some phonies do stay on the board even in big games.
Yeah. Now, what does Brad do? That rack. It's quite funny if Dave had actually. Oh, nice. Oh, Zaidi through the A and D.
Very nice.
Very nice. That's a hefty spread loss for Dave there.
And look at this, Brad, very close to 500 points, and that I think reinforces the point you were making, Jesse, in the earlier game, that we're seeing a lot more games where the scores are around the 500 mark than we were maybe a few years back.
Frankly, there are games where I hit 500. I'm still not sure I'm going to win.
And I think not only does Collins have more words and more words with each update, you also have a lot of really good software for learning words. So the players have got the tools available to really increase their vocabulary and their certainty of words. So they're able to play at a high level.
Right. Well, back in my day, you had to. No, I'm just kidding. I cannot make that kind of claim. I am amazed. I guess I'll shout out Nigerian Scrabble. In Nigeria, they don't say study; they say read. That's they say. They'll say I read for 3 hours yesterday, as in their way of studying is to read the dictionary. Like they're not as clued into the tools yet. I believe
They're not card boxing in Nigeria.
that is the impression I've been given. I've heard stories from some of our Nigerian fellow players, stories about like going out at night, like going to a club and then bringing a word list with you in your pocket, and then furiously studying it when you go out for a breather or something like that. This is pretty romantic, really.
Yeah, had a pull.
So anyway, shout out to Nigerian Scrabble and reading
8 now.
the true analog. Even a lot of U.S. players, I think, would cite that as the best way of really deeply learning something, if not most efficient. Anyway, the game has ended while I prattled on,
13.
and Brad has done it.
Good game.
390.
Yeah, that's a good result for Brad because he's now 2 games ahead of Dave, who must be one of his main competitors in this tournament, although there are a lot of good players. But there's still time for Dave to come back and be a contender at the end of tomorrow.
Yeah, that was a pretty good shot.
Right. I think it would be unwise to Dave Wieg, given his history of success. But let's give some credit to Brad on this one. He played a really nice game, found his bingos, slapped down Mantissa in about 3 seconds, and showed some really good judgment at the end of the game. So
He did, and he was on the receiving end of back-to-back bingos from Dave in Analogic and Heraldic. But he kept his focus and moved into a really good position towards the end.
right, and those bingos, while they were high probability, were born of careful play. Especially Goopy stands out as a move that kind of unlocked the future potential of his rack. So it's easy to look at a game and say, "Oh, he bingoed," and then he bingoed again the third time. But this is the product of some deliberate skill and effort there.
Agreed.
Well, folks, we've had 2 really very nice games this morning. It's been a pleasure to commentate these. I'm Jesse Day, and I'm going to stick with you for 2 more games. For 2 more games of exciting Collins action. And I want to thank my partner here, David Webb, who's a great co-commentator, a legend of the Scrabble casting game, really. As I said, he has a very a fun YouTube channel. It gives you a taste of our world. And I'll let Dave sign off here.
Well, it's been a pleasure commentating with you, Jesse, and it's also been a pleasure to watch 2 such fantastic games. It's a real privilege to see top players in action, and we've had an absolute feast of Scrabble in the first 2 games of today. So thank you, everyone, for watching, and Jesse will be back with you shortly.
Cheers, everyone. See you soon.